Welcome Bible students. Welcome to Bible Simplified. Our ministry is to simplify and bring the Word of God in a nutshell to those who have difficulty reading, interpreting and understanding the Word of God, including those who have busy lifestyles. Please download and share the Word of God with others. Today we take a look at the book of Daniel. Please join us. Let's begin. Daniel's story is set right after Babylon's first attack on Jerusalem. They had plundered the city and the temple, taking a wave of Israelites into exile. Among these prisoners were 4 men, from the royal family line of David. Daniel, whose name later changed to Belteshazzar, and his 3 friends, who you probably know by their Babylonian names, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This book tells of their struggles to maintain hope in the land of their conquerors. Daniel chapters 1 to 6. Dreams, Visions, and Persecutions. Chapter 1 introduces Daniel and his friends, who are wise and capable, and are soon recruited to serve in the royal palace of Babylon. However, they are also pressured to give up their Jewish identity, by living and eating like Babylonians, and violating the Jewish food laws found in the Torah. They refuse and instead choose faithfulness to the Torah. This decision puts them in grave danger, but God delivers them, and they go on to be elevated by the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon has a dream that only Daniel is able to interpret. The dream is about a huge statue that dominates the landscape, and is made up of 4 types of metal. Daniel says the statue symbolizes a sequence of kingdoms, with Babylon as the head. Suddenly, a huge rock flies in and shatters the statue, turning it into a mountain. Now, this dream is the first of many symbolic visions in the book, but this one introduces a basic storyline. Daniel says that the statue represents a train of human kingdoms, following after Babylon, that will fill God's world with violence. One day, however, God's kingdom will come and humble the arrogant nations of the world, filling the earth with the healing and justice of God. Chapter 3 tells the famous story of Daniel's 3 friends. They refuse to bow down and worship a huge idol statue, which represents the king and his imperial power, just like the statue in the previous chapter. The friends are persecuted for their choice and thrown into a fiery furnace. Once again, God delivers them from death, and they're exalted by the king, who now acknowledges that their God is the true one. The king sees a 4th man in the fire that he states looks like a god. They were saved and not a hair on them scorched. Chapter 4 and 5 make up a pair of stories about 2 Babylonian kings, Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazzar. Both are filled with pride because of their power, so, as in chapter 2, God warns them both through dreams and visions. Again, just like in chapter 2, only Daniel can interpret for them. After doing so, he tells both kings that they are to humble themselves before God, and they both arrogantly resist. Nebuchadnezzar is stricken with madness and becomes like a beast in the fields. Eventually, he does humble himself before God, and as his humanity returns, he is restored as king. After King Nebuchadnezzar dies, his son Belshazzar becomes king. This contrasts with his son Belshazzar, who does not humble himself and is assassinated that very night. These 2 stories draw their imagery from Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and Psalms 8, where humans are depicted as the royal image of God, and appointed to rule over the beasts, on behalf of God, who is the world's true king. When human kingdoms forget that they are not God, when they exalt their own power as divine, they become less than human, and more like violent beasts who will face God's justice. In chapter 6, it's Daniel who's persecuted because he refuses to pray to and worship the king as a god. So, like the friends, he is sentenced to death and thrown into a lion's den. The king at that time was King Darius the Great. God delivers him from the beasts, and, like the friends, the king exalts Daniel and praises his God. Chapter 7 Daniel's dream of the 4 beasts and the Son of Man. In chapter 7, the center of the book of Daniel, where all the themes come together. The focus of the story is another dream, but this time it's Daniel that has the dream. Ironically, He can't understand it until an angelic messenger explains it to him. Daniel sees a series of 4 beasts. 3 of them are like a lion, a bear, and a winged leopard, and each symbolizes arrogant kingdoms. The last creature is a monstrosity, identified as a terribly evil empire. This 4th beast has lots of horns, a common symbol for kings in the Old Testament, with one specific horn that represents a king who arrogantly exalts himself above God and persecutes his covenant people. The symbol for God's people is a figure called the Son of Man, who is both an image of God's covenant people and their king from the line of David. God, who's referred to as the Ancient of Days, comes to set up his throne. He destroys the great monster, the 4th beast, and exalts the Son of Man to the clouds, where he sits at God's side and shares in God's rule over the nations. We can now look back and see how all these stories and dreams work together. The 3 stories of faithfulness, despite persecution, are meant to offer hope to God's suffering people among the nations. They suffer because human kingdoms have rebelled against God and have become beasts. The visions encourage patience that waits for God to bring his rule over the world and vindicate his people. But when is God going to do this? That question is what the final 3 visions in the following chapters 8 to 12 are about. Daniel chapters 8 to 12. Visions of future kingdoms and an angelic visit. In chapter 8, Daniel has another vision about the final 2 beasts from the previous chapter. This time, they are symbolized by a ram and a goat. Out of the goat comes a bunch of horns, one of which symbolizes the 4th beast in chapter 7. In this vision, we're given a little more information about this king. He will attack Jerusalem and exalt himself above God by defiling the temple with idols. However, in the end, this king will be destroyed by God, who will in turn exalt his people and kingdom. In chapter 9, Daniel is puzzled as to when all this will take place. He consults the scroll of the prophet Jeremiah, where God said that Israel's exile would last for 70 years, before God would restore them. For Daniel, the 70 years are almost up, and he asks God to fulfill his promise. However, an angel comes and informs Daniel that Israel's sin and rebellion hasn't been fully dealt with by the exile, and their times of oppression under the nations will last 7 times longer than Jeremiah had envisioned. Daniel is deeply disturbed, and he has one final vision. We're shown the same sequence of kingdoms: Persia, then Greece and Alexander the Great, followed by lesser kings that all lead up to the final king of the north. He will invade Jerusalem, set up idols in the temple, and exalt himself above God. The vision concludes, like the others, with this king suddenly coming to ruin. Now, there have been endless debates about what all these visions refer to. Many see a clear connection to the exploits of the Syrian king Antiochus during the mid-2nd century BCE. He killed many faithful Jews in Jerusalem and set up idols in the temple. Others think that they point forward to the Roman Empire's role in the execution of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem and its temple in 70 CE. Still others think that it all will be fulfilled in the future events that will happen when Jesus returns. The problem is that the symbols and numbers don't quite match any of these views perfectly, which opens up the possibility that, in a sense, they are all right. The Book of Daniel has been designed to offer hope to all future generations of God's people. It did so in the days of Antiochus' empire, and it has ever since. That's why Jesus used imagery from Daniel to accuse the oppressive leaders he confronted in Jerusalem, and it is why John, who wrote the Revelation, adapted Daniel's visions and applied them to the Roman Empire of his day, as well as all future oppressive empires. The Book of Daniel offers readers of all generations an insight into God's promise and a pattern at work in history. The pattern reveals how humans and their kingdoms become violent beasts when they glorify their power and don't acknowledge God as their true king. But Daniel's visions also hold out a promise that one day, God will confront the beast, rescue his world and his people, and bring his kingdom. This book is for every generation, and it speaks a message of hope that motivates faithfulness. Important points to consider while reading the Book of Daniel are: King Nebuchadnezzar was the first king that Daniel served and the king of Babylon. King Belshazzar was the second king, successor to Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. The third king was King Darius, also known as Darius the Great of Persia. King Cyrus, the fourth and last king that Daniel served and the king of Persia. Most believe today that Babylon refers to modern-day America, Persia known today as Iran, and the Greek Empire as Greece. The winged lion refers to Babylon, who was the focus of Daniel chapters 1–4 and is here revealed as the first kingdom. The bear was a prophecy about the joint Medo-Persian Empire in which the Persian side was larger and more dominant. The overtaking of Babylon by this empire was the focus of Daniel chapter 5. The winged leopard was a prophecy about the future coming of the Greek Empire, which would conquer the Persian Empire and expand beyond it. This prophecy came true when Alexander the Great, by his early 30s, had conquered the known world with lightning speed, metaphorically running by and flying over his enemies. Alexander died young without an heir, and so his empire was split between 4 generals as predicted in Daniel's vision. The fourth beast. The Roman Empire is depicted as a demonic monstrosity of weapons, and it came to become the largest and longest-standing empire in world history. Jesus Christ was born, tried, and murdered by the Roman Empire. In the Bible, the Roman Empire is associated with the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7. The revived Roman Empire is a predicted government that will rise to power in the end times. Some interpretations suggest that this Antichrist empire will be centered in Rome, Turkey, or the Middle East. This has indeed been an in-depth Bible study. I hope you have grasped as much as you can from this video. Please download and share with others. God bless you. Take care.